Hi, this is Gary Dranow from Park City, Utah, and the Gary Dranow Show, proudly broadcasting to you from Radio Evolve Rocks in Santa Barbara, California. Listen more and evolve. Welcome back to the show. I'm Gary Dranow. Today's episode is a special one because we're pulling back the curtain on something most people only see in a few minutes on television once a year, the Grammys. But what we're really talking about today is Grammy Week. My guest has been part of this world for over 3 decades as a songwriter, producer, voting member of the Recording Academy. He's lived the culture, the community, and the moments you never see on television. We're going to talk with Grant. We're going to talk all about Grammy Week, what it really is, why it matters, and why after even 35 years plus it's never loses its magic. So let's jump in. Welcome, Larry Dvoskin.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's a pleasure to be here and share with listeners, viewers, the excitement about Grammy Week, which is more than just a one-night stand.
Most people think Grammys are just the one night, red carpet awards performances, but what do people miss when they only see that broadcast?
Well, let me roll back to you something and just give listeners a philosophical thing. All of these type of things are about dreams. You know, this dream of doing something creative and then somehow the world finding out or acknowledgement by your peers. And I want to go off script a little bit. What came to mind just before we started was, you know, in the early 90s, I started to actually succeed more and more in my career living in New York. And I saw the Grammys were happening there at Radio City Music Hall. And I tried to sneak in to the after party of the Grammys. And I remembered from living in London that I did sneak into some kind of hippie festival on this guy who owned a castle, and I used the word canary yellow. Like no one would use the word canary yellow. And I went to this after party where I knew it was happening, and I got through the first security by saying, "Oh, I forgot my ticket and my passes all the way in." And I said it was in my canary yellow jacket. And then I got to the second security and the third. And I almost kind of like crashed the party, not the actual awards, but the last person just looked me up and down, said, "You weren't here, you weren't there. I know you're, good, very good try, but not quite." And so I went away with my tail between my legs. And that year I signed with a music publisher so that the following year I was an official signed member. And I haven't really looked back ever since. It's grown tremendously from a rather several thousand people who are members to over 20,000 recently. But it's what the Grammys are a dream realized for people around the world. It's whether you are doing new age chant music, whether you're doing Mexican music, whether you're doing hard rock and heavy metal or rap or hip hop or pop or classical, it's a way to be acknowledged by your peers. That's an entire week of activities before, during, and after. And it's a lot of fun, basically. Whether you're nominated or not, it's a community. And that's what we're going to stress here, is about community and how there's no on or off switch to building community. No matter how old you are, you could start tomorrow and just get to know people and start reaching out.
Don't I know it? Larry, tell me a little bit about Grammy Week. What are some of the things that go on?
Well, there are events that happen all throughout the week. There is a section of the Grammy Academy called the Producers Wing. So they have a special get-together. There's a section called the Songwriters Wing. They have a special get-together. There are different parties held by different companies, whether they're record companies. There is a lawyer's lunch on Friday, the Friday before Grammy Sunday, where all the sort of business side of the business get together and they honor someone. Then on Friday night, there is what's called Music Cares, which is the charity that's connected to the Grammys, During COVID, they paid people's bills, and people who suddenly had tours canceled or clubs closed and they couldn't play, they paid your bills if you, you know, submitted forms to them and had some kind of verification that your income was disrupted. They also pay for medical expenses for people who can't afford them. So this year they're honoring Mariah Carey, and they're having a lot of people perform songs that she's done. But it varies. I've been there when they honor Aerosmith. I mean, you couldn't be more different than Aerosmith or Mariah Carey. So it's a rotating field of honorees that raises millions of dollars. Saturday night, the night before, there is a private event called the Clive Davis pre-Grammy party. It started out originally as a standalone thing by former Columbia Records president, Arista founder Clive Davis, and he used it to introduce people to his artists like Whitney Houston or like Barry Manilow, and it's become such a hot ticket that it's invite only. And I'm going this year. Clive Davis is in his 90s. What's so great about it is you're not like in a audience looking at performers on stage. All the performers are in the audience. So everybody's kind of meeting each other and talking to each other, and we'll get into that in a minute. But then Saturday are the awards itself at the Crypto.com arena, and it's a spectacle and it's live. And, we have little breaks where there are commercials because it's live. So you see a performance and then you sit there like waiting for 3 minutes and then it starts again. And then there are parties afterward for various record companies, and various artists even hold their own parties.
Well, let's get a little bit technical just for a second. Let's
Sure.
talk about the Recording Academy itself. People hear NARAS and the Grammys, but they don't always understand what it really represents.
Yeah, so the actual technical, like people talk about the Oscars and they don't realize it's there's some more technical jargon, or the Golden Globes, the Hollywood Foreign Press. The Grammys are run technically by a company, a nonprofit 501c called the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences.
Right,
And
right.
it started before I was born. I came into it fairly late in the early 90s. As I said, after trying to sneak in, I actually finally kind of got on the map and the radar to be officially in. And, it's really an organization run by peers, and peers of you nominate, which is why it's so special. It's not just like the American Choice Awards or, I don't know, American Idol, where there are 3 judges or something. It's really a committee of your peers say that you are the best in some category. And that's what makes it so special.
How do you become a voting member?
The way you become a voting member, there are 2 types of members. There are not obviously non-voting and voting. I'm a voting member because I have released a number of songs within the last 5 years that they can go on Spotify or iTunes or Tidal or Amazon Music and find my songs and find, my being an actual member, so they know they're not just letting bots or fake people in that can influence the vote. I have to be proven. And I think the missing special sauce is that I can't just sort of go to a website and sign up. Someone who is a voting member has to nominate me. And I get 2 of those ability to nominate someone new per year, and then in March 1st it cancels out and I get 2 more. So every year I can nominate 2 people who have released a certain number of songs. It's a little technical. I don't want to be, don't quote me on this, check online, but because I've been a member for a long time, they wanted to do, like, how you refresh a page on the computer? They wanted to do a refresh. So they said previous members needed to have 6 songs within the last 5 years. New members who haven't ever been a member need 12 songs released within the last 5 or 6 years. And again, it's not on an album or vinyl or CD or something. It's really just on a streaming platform, but it can't just
like
be
Spotify.
like Spotify. It can't just be on your website. You have to be on Spotify or something, which anyone can do at this point, using any of the online tools. But you have to be a real musician to get in.
Well, little birdie told me that you might be nominating me.
Absolutely, I'm nominating you. You put out more songs in a month than I put out in a year, or maybe even 5 years. So, as far as I'm concerned, you, Gary Dranow, are the perfect candidate for the Grammys because you've been around long enough. And, you know, a lot of people think, this cliche of ageism that you have to be, a teenager or something. But I know for myself that I have more wisdom with age than I did when I was a lot younger. And you have a lot of wisdom from life experience. So your songs can touch a lot of people because they touch a lot of experiences that people share in common.
Did we touch on all the important events that people never see, or there's more?
Well, there's tons of events. So, again, what I wanted to mention is that each night there are different things. I mean, even companies will have little private events like TikTok or Snapchat or Spotify. There are events going on all over the city, hundreds of events. There's also certain hangs. I don't want to, give it away, but there are certain hotels that are the premium, A-list hotels, and during any award season, they're full of everybody. Everybody piles into the city. So I'll tell you, for the Oscars, I went to one of the hotels, and Queen had just had the movie Bohemian Rhapsody released that year, and they opened the Academy Awards playing a song. And I went to one of these hotels, and I was sitting having breakfast, and the members of Queen were next to me. And when I was much younger in the 80s, my band Zeno, that I was playing keyboards in, opened for Queen, and that Roger Taylor, the drummer, recognized me and was like, wait a minute, I kind of remember you. And we took pictures. So anyone in LA, if you're cool, go book a lunch at one of the hotels. You'll probably run into half the people from the Grammys. But on Friday night, there is this charity event, Music Cares. This year it's Mariah Carey, and people pay to raise money for their charitable arm to help people get over drug addiction, pay medical bills, pay their expenses. They do all kinds of outreach to help people. And then Saturday in the daytime, this coming Saturday, in the daytime, there is a Lifetime Achievement event that's happening where several people from Fela Kuti to Paul Simon to Carlos Santana and many others are getting Lifetime Achievement Awards, whether they show up or not. And then Saturday night is the Clive Davis pre-Grammy party. And I've been there just the most amazing people have performed at the Clive Davis party. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then Sunday is the Grammy Awards themselves at the Crypto.com arena. And then there are little after parties that happen. And so usually by Monday or Tuesday, it kind of all like you'll probably meet more people at the airport than you will in Beverly Hills, because everybody's leaving by the day after.
Standout memory. You had a historic moment during the Grammys week. Is this one of your standout memories, Beach Boys' 50th anniversary?
Since the early 1990s, I was introduced to one of the co-founders of the Beach Boys, Al Jardine. Currently, the only two living original members, like originals, although David Marks is also an original, but he's, I don't know, somehow not as featured in the media mind, but I feature him. But the originals, Mike Love, and at the time Brian Wilson, and at the time Al Jardine, together with a few of the other people who joined later on, like Bruce Johnson, got together for their 50th anniversary. And I was here, and I called Al Jardine, and it was on a Thursday before Grammy Sunday, and he said, just come on in, we're doing a dress rehearsal. And I had to go into this side road and underground parking lot and through this thing, and my name was at the door, and I got a little wristband, and I went up, and they were just sort of building this set, with a lot of surfboards in the background, and like sets of like kind of fake ocean waves, and it was a technical run through. And what was really cool was there was a band, Foster the People, Mark Foster's band, that was doing Wouldn't It Be Nice, and then Adam Levine and Maroon 5 were doing Surfer Girl, and then the Beach Boys joined both bands, and they all together did Good Vibrations, and it was just thrilling to be there. And then the day of the Grammys, I didn't realize that they do an entire dress rehearsal the day of, starting at 10 a.m. and they run through the whole show, and then they do, and then it goes live at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So we got there in a van, and it's this huge empty arena, and where the Lakers play, and you're just in there with all these musicians.
Oh,
So
the old Forum?
It's not the Forum. It's a different. It's now called the Crypto.com Arena. At the time, it was called the
Okay.
Staples Center. So it's
Oh,
downtown.
that's right. Yeah.
So it's a different arena, but around the same size. And as we were walking toward the stage, now you're not allowed to take photos because they don't want someone leaking the look of the telecast beforehand. It was by 2012, people were already online and on social media. So, no photography was allowed. But then Paul McCartney was just kind of lingering in the backstage in the hallway, and he saw, Brian, Mike, and Ali. Was like, "Oh my God, the Beach Boys!" And in the '60s, in their most potent days creatively, the Beach Boys and Beatles were like friendly brother sister competitors. So I, of course, whipped out my phone and started taking pictures of Brian, Mike, no, Brian, Al, and I'm trying to think, and Paul McCartney. And, it was just for me like a wow moment. I'm a fan of these people. I grew up with them. I wasn't in music when they were the most famous bands. Then Paul McCartney turned to me and he said, "Do you want a picture with me?" And I was like, oh, seeing the Wizard of Oz, and I handed someone my phone, and at first it didn't work. And Paul McCartney put his arm around me, and the person was jiggling, trying to get the phone. And meanwhile, suddenly all Paul's handlers are trying to pull him away, and like as handlers do, like you shouldn't be with the,
The
and
riffraff.
so Paul like whispers in my ear, in his usual, as the English would say when you're doing a practical joke, it's taking the piss. And he said, if this is going to take a while, it's going to cost you 50 quid, mate, because, I'm Paul McCartney. And he's got his arm around me, and he's like joking, saying it's going to cost me 50 English pounds. And then my phone still didn't work. I had to step out, change it from video to photo, and step back in. And he said, mate, it's going to cost you 100 quid if I have to wait any longer, because I'm Paul McCartney. And it was so delightful, Gary, because he was able to make fun of his own fame, like to see himself as a person and then this other thing as Paul McCartney.
No pretense.
So when we got out and they were doing the run through, obviously they're not going to open envelopes in the dress rehearsal. So each presenter was like, and the winner for best country duo is Minnie and Mickey Mouse, or the best heavy metal performance is Donald Duck. Like, they just made up names because obviously the envelopes aren't open until that moment. But at 3 o'clock, 2 hours before the performance, whatever pass you have as a guest of the dress rehearsal expires, and suddenly a lot of security show up. I don't want to use the word that stands for frozen water because it's a bad word right now in America, but all of these very heavily serious looking people showed up. And luckily for me, Al Jardine just took his artist all access pass and put it on me. Said, just hang out. Like, no one's going to throw him out because he's performing. So the net is I kind of went through the whole thing. I sat with the guys. And then, long before it was their time to perform, they get up and leave, and seat, holders come, and people dressed who look really cool come, so that when the cameras are hitting the audience, it doesn't look like there are holes in the audience. Like it looks like it's
Oh
sold.
yeah, fillers.
So I really got to kind of go through the whole experience with them. And honestly, it was just for me as a musician, as somebody who grew up in America, the Beach Boys are more than just songs or a band. They're part of the fabric of our culture, part of the DNA of our existence. And so to be there with friends, to be looked at as a colleague and not just sort of like a guy who bought a ticket or something, it was just very special memory for me. And I thank Al Jardine for being so generous and so kind. His family has treated me like I'm part of the family. And that's what makes being a musician so special, is the relationships you build. I can't stress that enough. Listeners, wherever you live, whatever you're doing,
Build
find
community.
or build community. It's the essence of survival of the species. Our species would have died out long ago if everybody was just an independent, isolated creature. Communities form, and together they thrive and succeed.
Describe the environment for someone who's never experienced, and you've done a little bit of it, but let's go in a little deeper.
Well, it depends on what you're doing and where you are. I mean, the Clive Davis pre-Grammy party is something that's altogether like a fantasy for, most normal human beings. I mean, I forget, I may have them switched, but
Well,
maybe
where is the Clive Davis party held?
it's held at the Beverly Hilton Ballroom. It's the same place as the Golden Globes and other things. So it's a ballroom with tables. So it's not like there's a I mean, people like myself, at this point, I don't need to come to the dinner. I come to the concert afterward. But it's a place where you might have a table with Joni Mitchell sitting in one seat, and then David Hockney, the incredible, renowned painter, is sitting in the next seat. Next to him is Evan Spiegel, the founder of Snapchat. Next to, Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones. And then the table next to them could be, uh, Tim Cook and people, the chairman of Apple, sitting with Seal or sitting with Madonna. I mean, it's an unbelievable mix of people. And everybody's just sort of hanging out, and schmoozing. I mean, we went to the bathroom, and my partner, his parents came here as immigrants. And so he grew up, was born here, American citizen, but he learned about a lot of American music from watching the movie Forrest Gump. And we were sitting, a few years back at one of the tables, and Tom Hanks walks by and goes up the aisle. And my friend freaks because, I mean, he learned about music from watching Forrest Gump, starring Tom Hanks. So he said, "Oh my God." I said, "No, just wait. I know where he's going. This aisle leads up to the men's room." So we went up to the men's room, and I just led him up there, and I knew Tom, just like any other person, was just going to the bathroom, like with everybody else. And my friend went up, and Tom was there first, so he was finishing up, and I was trying to stall him. And I did music. This is a weird unknown fact, but Tom's first ever movie, Tom Hanks, is a movie called He Knows You're Alone, about a crazed killer who kills brides the night before their wedding. And I did some of the music for it. So, an unknown Tom Hanks and I were in a screening, back in the 80s, and the whole cast was there. We were all screaming because we'd never seen the movie on a screen. So I was trying to stall him, and then my friend came, and I introduced my partner, Nikita, and Tom, almost in perfect Forrest Gump voice and tone, was like, "Hi, my name's Tom. I've never met a Nikita before." And he talked really slow, like forest, and then we all took pictures, and it was just to give that gift, Gary, to my friends, to have that meeting. I don't need a photo with a famous person. I mean, there's very few living people that I need to meet, but it was just wonderful to give that experience to someone else. And to point to Clive Davis, I mean, he started as a lawyer for Fender Guitars, which was part of CBS, which was part of Columbia Records, and worked harder and smarter than anyone, and rose in a pinnacle moment of critical music history, into being president of Columbia Records. So under his watch, you had the signings of, Bob Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel and Aerosmith and Blood, Sweat and Tears and Earth, Wind and Fire and Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel, and, I could go on and on and on. And then he left and he formed Arista Records. And Arista then went on to have Whitney Houston and Alicia Keys and Barry Manilow and the Outlaws and the Grateful Dead. I mean, and most people would have retired, back then. I'm sure he probably had enough money or success, but he's been at it ever since. And what he's done, Gary, is what I talk about, is he's built community. I'm sure people probably might have had some kind of argument with him or something I don't know about. But if you have a choice between getting, on the bad side of Clive or getting uninvited to his party, you'll pick going to his party over any monetary or creative concern, because it's just such a cool place to be with the most creative people on earth. And giving it to Clive, he's in his 90s and he's still going strong. This is the 40-something year of the party, and he brings all these people together. I mean, that's an amazing miracle in this day of everyone being connected online, but in real life separate. He brings everyone together in real life.
IRL. After all this time, why does it still matter?
The Grammys still matter because there is something about being recognized by your peer that confirms all of the hardship you've gone through, all of the times the door is slammed in your face, all of the people growing up who said you don't have the talent, you're not good looking enough, you don't play well enough, you don't sing well enough, you don't, all of the things that you go through that tell you, who are you kidding? You really think you're going to be that guy? I mean, come on. All of that stuff, it melts that away and says, here you are recognized by your peers. There's also another bump that happens. A lot of people watch the show from around the world. It's a global telecast, and they discover new artists that they've never heard before. So there's a guy, a New Yorker named Somber, that I listened to once or twice. I found online. He's up for Best New Artist. So people will discover him and then start listening to his music, whether they're streaming it, whether they're buying a CD. So it's a way of discovery, and it helps with sales and with success. It builds success for people. And so from the inside, there's that. And from the outside, it really honors music that may not be so visible for people in just listening to the top 40 radio. So for instance, there's a friend of mine from South Africa named Wouter Kellerman, and he plays flute, and he has won Grammys 3 times for Best New Age Artist. And so he's coming to Los Angeles, and I believe he's nominated again, I'm not sure, this year, so don't quote me, but we became friends last year. I had a little cocktail party. Somehow we were introduced online, and he came to my house, and now we become really good friends. So who knows, this year I may create some kind of beautiful piano, new age, like feel good piece and have him play on it. And then, we'll submit it for Grammys next year. And so, all of these wonderful things happen that make it current, because people meet and then they decide to collaborate together.
Okay. Um,
And then there's a lunch, by the way. His
oh, there we go.
to mention Gary, Gary, to mention Wouter Kellerman, we just became kind of buddies. And by the way, for anyone who just is maybe a fan, there are certain groups online on social media, including Facebook, where you can just type the word Grammy in and join groups of people who are musicians or music fans, but also music creators, including some of the people you might see on stage. So you don't have to travel to LA to sort of start to look inside the box and see what it's like in the room of the Grammys. You can, go on Instagram or Facebook or any of the socials and just type in the word Grammy and join groups where you're allowed to meet people, share ideas, share music you're discovering, share your own music. It's not limited to just people. Some of the groups are limited to just Grammy voters and they're closed to outsiders, but there's a lot of open groups. So again, if music is something you love, jump in, get involved.
Um, Producing panels and gatherings, songwriting focus events, informal meetups that often matter more than awards. Um, this is the community you're talking about.
Well, it's that plus more. It's that and more. The Grammys are headed by different people, just like we have elections and we have different leaders. When I first joined in the 1990s, there was a man named Michael Green who ran the Grammys. Then a friend of mine named Neil Portnow became the president of the Grammys for many years. He had been my first producer and mentor, and a beloved guy by many, but he had some things happen that were things I can't deny or confirm that involved him personally. But he was replaced by someone he was mentoring named Harvey Mason Jr. And Harvey Mason is a producer and musician. He calls himself the Diva Whisperer because he has produced a lot of the big female singers that are famous, like Whitney and Aretha and Diana Ross and others that are the big divas. So he has really broadened what the Grammy.com or NARIS or whatever you want to call it has become. And there are all these panels and all these online things where you're not just meeting the superstars, you're meeting people who are coming up through the ranks, and they're giving talks about production, they're giving talks about songwriting. Some people are performing just like Zoom performances, some people are doing meetups. Each chat, and by the way, just so you know, at least in America, the Grammys are an American-based music 501c charity company. Actually, don't quote me on that. I know Music Cares is a 501c. I'm not sure if NARIS is, because they take in money to support their organization. There are no shareholders or stock, but I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty that I don't know. But what I do know is that since Harvey Mason has come in around 2018 or 19, he's really expanded the Grammys to be a reflection of our culture. So there are a lot more women who are being nominated and involved. There are a lot more people of color, Latinos, Asians, people from other parts of the world. It's become a much more reflection of, what the world looks like, as opposed to what people might complain about an organization that's been around so long that's like rich white guys or some other thing. It's not that at all now. It's really a lot of new people have come in. The membership has almost doubled. And there are all kinds of opportunities in New York, in Nashville, in Austin, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. There are chapters of the Academy all over America. So even if you don't get to become a member as a voting member, you can also see what the criteria as a non-voting member. And then if you live in Miami, you get invited to all these events there. It's just a win-win for everyone who loves music or is involved in music. Because again, you meet people to collaborate with, it's rinse and repeat. I've been going for long enough that I walk in the room and even people who don't know me well recognize me and they're like, hey, this guy's here again. What was, oh, Larry, yeah, that's right. And so I've really become a part of the family, of the extended family. And that means a lot as you get older, that you're not like, a lot of people in any field, it could be business, it could be sports, it could be, movies, it could be music. They go away bitter after a while. Like, oh, I had a few good years. If you can put those emotions aside and look at the world for how can I help as opposed to how can I extract from it, you stick around longer because you find value in whatever's happening at the time. So last year I went, this year I'm not going, or maybe I will. If people call me the last minute, say I have an extra ticket. But it was a lot of fun going last year because I saw my friend Teddy Swims sing, and he has that song "Losing Control" that has Billboard recently said it was the longest top 10 Billboard hit in the history of Billboard's reporting. And
Wow.
he's a guy I knew since before he got famous. He was just playing piano at a party with this huge voice, like monstrous, soulful Southern voice, and every time I'm at some place, I get a tap on the shoulder, and I turn around to him. He's like, "Hey," So become part of the family is what I say, and that's why I go out to these events.
Producer wing panels and gatherings, songwriter focus events, and as you've been talking about, informal meetups that often matter more than awards.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about the uh, the songwriter focus events.
Well, it's really there are. Let me just also say that these aren't limited to just Grammy Week. I mean, it's throughout the year that the organization hosts events, and what they do is they really love to network people. And so some of these events are online. You might have a very renowned person who's written a lot of hits giving like a little master class, or there may be a local meetup at a bar or restaurant. But what the Academy likes to do is to get people in touch with each other, whether it's digitally like we're talking or whether it's in person. And it's not just that as well. They do a lot of charity fundraising, as I said, through Music Cares. There are events. I myself, a year ago, was able to look out my front window and see, short-lived, there was a fire that spread and was put out, thankfully, pretty quickly near Hollywood, right near like where they hold the Oscars, right near where the Hollywood Bowl is. I could see it from my front window. So before they even called an emergency or said a warning, I was out the door because I don't want to be stuck on a road in traffic while the fire's moving at 60 miles an hour toward me. So I moved and got out. And what the Grammy folks did, and it's a little off topic of your question but it's an important thing to know about them, is that they just really helped the people who were affected by the fires in LA. Another thing I didn't get to talk to you about is that on Grammy Sunday, which is this Sunday, February 1st, there are two events. There's the non-televised event that happens in the daytime, and then starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time and 5 p.m. Pacific Time, it's
There's
the
a
televised.
non-televised event at the
Yeah.
crypto.com arena
Well, it's next
or
door to
the
the
Staples
crypto.
Center.
It's in that LA Live. There's a thing called the Peacock Theater, which is where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had their gala this past October that we went to. Um, and what was funny for me is I really meant to get to the pre-telecast because there were a lot of friends of mine there, and the sound man, my friend Marco Uselli, was doing the sound, and he was we had coffee, and he's like, "Come, I'm doing the sound for the house, and you come and we hang out." And my friend Mutter, who I mentioned was up for Best New Age, was there, and then also the Beatles were up for this track that they were able to revive using AI to separate John Lennon's voice from the piano, because when they first recorded it in the 90s, the piano and the voice like were mixed together and it didn't sound good. And all the people that I knew won the awards in the afternoon, and I was meant to go, but I forget what happened, but I just couldn't get out of here and get downtown, and I kept watching it, I think on YouTube or something else where it was for free, and I kept seeing my friends win and say, damn, I wish I had been there. And so there's just a lot going on, is what I'm saying. That is much more.
Reflecting, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah,
Reflecting on last year's single of yours, This New Age, which came close to the final Grammy ballot,
yeah.
tell me about that.
Well, thanks for asking. The wonderful thing about music is really good music. It could be, as repetitive as we've heard, All I Want for Christmas or Jingle Bells, or it could be a Beethoven symphony, or it could be a Beatles song. Is the really good music is timeless. So I read the book 1984 by George Orwell about this weird, you know, like the world being controlled by, these sort of
This
overlords,
dystopian world,
this
yeah.
dystopian world. And I wrote this song, This New Age, and the first line, and this is going back to before around 1981, the first line says, things are so strange, Exxon, money, and computers rule the day. And funny enough, after COVID and post COVID, I just thought, wow, this song about mankind being like at the pinnacle of a point where we can go in one direction and pull back from the brink and save ourselves and come together, or we might even destroy ourselves. Who knows? We have weapons of mass destruction now that are in the sky and satellites and under the ocean. So it wasn't giving people an answer or taking sides. It was just posing this humanistic question of which way are we going to go. And so I put that song together, influenced by a lot of prog rock things. And the reaction that I got was something I didn't expect, where people were just, one person said it began like the Beatles' Abbey Road side 2, then went into Stairway to Heaven, and then ended with Freebirds, like a wild guitar solo that was epic, and comparing it to things that are really iconic moments of music history. And the respect I got from my peers really told me that just doing the art for the art's sake really is something that I can't put a price on. It's why I do it, and it came out the way I heard it, and I really had different people working on it. So we went to it was submitted, and the thing is, if you're a voting member, you can submit your own songs into a beginning list, and the beginning list for each category is hundreds and hundreds of things. Some are the famous things, Elton John and Brandy Carlisle, or the Dalai Lama for spoken word, or something that is world famous, but a lot of it's independent people like myself that just put it up on Spotify. And then it's a little bit of a race. You can't bribe people, you can't give people gifts, you can't do a lot of things that would be kind of like shady to try to convince people, or get a group of people to try to vote for you. But you can put it out there and say, look, here's the song, take a listen. If you like it, consider it. And that's all I did. And we did that for a few months, and we're very excited, but it didn't get through to the final nomination. It was in a very obscure category called Best Alternative Music Performance, which I don't know what that means, but it was in the rock section. So
Yeah.
I was just glad to be in the best. And an advice I'll give to music people who are maybe listening to this at some point in the future, if you go up for Song of the Year, you go up for Album of the Year. I mean, you're going up against the big heavy hitters. I mean, it's you against Taylor Swift or Beyonce or Bad Bunny or the Rolling Stones. The little categories are much easier because there's a lot less competition. It's common sense. There's a guy named, and I didn't know about him until I went to one of these for your consideration gigs here in LA, where it was just, I was notified someone was playing. I didn't get a free ticket. I had to pay. I had to pay to buy drinks. But I got to see a guy named Fantastic Negrito, and he looks like Sly Stone. He's got the big pork chop sideburns and the hair and the glittery outfits, and he's funky. And he was kind of a homeless guy who really went through a terrible, like foster homes and sexual abuse, all of this shit. And he got on this tiny desk thing online and he won. And that gave him a platform suddenly online. And he's won 3 Grammys, Gary. And you've
Wow.
never even I tell people about Fantastic Negrito and they look at me with a blank stare like, who is
Who's
this guy?
this?
And
Yeah.
he's won in the contemporary blues category because he's not B.B. King, he's not Bo Diddley, he's not Robert Johnson, but the contemporary blues category that they very often add, subtract, move things around. The Grammys aren't concrete. They're fluid like water. They keep adding categories, merging things, changing the way. And I went to see this guy and he was amazing. So when people say, "Oh, there's no new good music, it's all the same," and I'm guilty of that too. I listen to a lot of stuff. It sounds plastic. It sounds like somebody with no musical talent hitting a button on some app. But there are also some amazing artists that we don't get to hear or discover because they might not be in the top 40, or on the homepage of Spotify, but they're fantastic, like Fantastic Negrito. So that's one of the benefits of this, why this organization still matters, is that it exposes to the world not only the legendary talents, but also the talents that you may not have heard of that you see for the first time. Say, hey, I'm going to check that out.
Being close is still part of the journey. It means the work is landing.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
You know, I'm a Who fan, Gary. I grew up, you know, you know, Won't Get Fooled Again, Behind Blue Eyes, Tommy. And I sat once at a dinner with Roger Daltrey. And, they broke the mold, especially, I'm in my 60s, he was a sex symbol, an icon. The Who were represented everything that rock and roll represents. They were unapologetic, they were experimental, they broke boundaries. And I had that lamenting thing with him of like, you're famous and I'm not kind of thing. But I didn't ask it that way. I said, Roger, like, what do you do if people tell you your whole life how talented you are and you try as hard as you can and you keep going at it and you're persistent and you're struggling, but it just doesn't click at the last minute? People don't, it falls away, or a deal doesn't happen, or the song doesn't get noticed, or whatever. And he turned to me and he said some wisdom that has stuck with me, which is that, like, did you create the music? Did you do the song? And I said, yeah. And he said, did you put it out somewhere? And I said, yeah, independently. He said, that's your job. Your job is done. Like, the rest is God or the universe or the Easter Bunny or whatever you want to have as some form of fate. But your job is just creating the music. And the rest of it is something that is something else happening. And so I have to step back for my own sense of self, Gary, and peace of mind that, the music is going to be, if there's still an internet, if the human race doesn't destroy itself, long after I'm no longer here, and long after you're no longer here,
Our
this new
music
age
is our legacy.
this new age will be available for generations that haven't been born yet. And so that's the win. The win is that we did it. Not that we thought about doing it. There's a lot of things I thought about doing that I haven't done, but what I have done is create and release music. And things take time, you know. I'll give you a fact. The Wizard of Oz, Frank Baum wrote The Wizard of Oz in the like I forgive me again. I'm a songwriter, so I'm bad with exact details, but around 1917, and it wasn't made into a movie until the late 1930s. It was the first color movie. That's 20 years later. He wasn't actually, I believe, alive to see The Wizard of Oz, get released in theaters as a film. And even at the time The Wizard of Oz was released in the late 30s, not a lot of people really took to it. They were like, this is kind of weird, short people dancing around and tra la la and the merry old land of Oz and lions and tigers and bears. They weren't really that enthralled by it. But when television started in the 1950s, suddenly television was like MTV in the beginning. They needed content. They needed to just fill anything that you could show.
I could remember seeing Wizard of Oz in black and white when I was quite young.
Yeah. So The Wizard of Oz came on the television in the 1950s, and suddenly it became one of the most beloved works of cinema history. From 1917, it took to the 1950s, and Frank Baum was long gone by then. And now we have Wicked, and we have all these, here we are a century later with all these other weird spin offs. So, our job, and the job of you as a listener and somebody viewing this, if you're a creative person, is your job is to do the creation. And it's nice if you hustle, it's nice if you try to get following online, all this stuff, but the truth is that great work stands out and it lasts, and other work falls to the wayside. I mean, I'm a student of success, but I'm even more of a student of failure. And so I know we've jumped away from the Grammys, but what the Grammys does is it gives people a kind of, it tells people like you've done, you've done something that has touched other people's lives, and we're going to acknowledge you for that. That's all it is. Everything else is icing on the cake, but that's the cake.
Well, we're almost at our hour, and what I'd like to do is end up this hour playing This New Age.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
oh, absolutely. So we're going to, unless you've got anything else you'd like to wrap up with, we're going to call it. And it's been a wonderful conversation with you. And take it away, This New Age.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Gary, for having me. We're going to have some fun in the future. So, everybody, listen to Gary's music. He rocks. Righteous.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, Larry.
All right. Peace.